Okay, there was a post you made about why you hate IQ tests and how they are virtually meaningless and archaic. You can't find it. In one of your groups, a parent is upset that they just found out their child has an IQ of 70, and you were going to send it to them. Okay, it's going to be back. I mean, I've made a couple posts like that, and I'm sure it was lengthy, but let me just sum it up. Um, it's not that I dislike or hate IQ scores. I find them meaningless and archaic, and I find those are good words because they don't have any value with regards to determining or charting an education course. All right, they're there as a mechanism for eligibility in the area of intellectual disability. They're also used for eligibility consideration as an option in order to show or display a discrepancy between a child's IQ score and a discrepancy, meaning that their IQ score isn't lining up with their achievement scores. And, you know, in most states, that standard deviation has to be 16 points or more, you know, as far as what the child's IQ score and what their predicted achievement, meaning what they should be at. You know, those calculations end up kicking out a number, and then that number has to be 16 points or more between these two scores. Outside of that, guys, what purpose does an IQ score serve with regards to education planning on an IEP team? And it doesn't. You know, but many schools will use it as a clever, nasty, targeted way to determine your child's education future. Because, you know, the idea with an IQ score is that you'll never achieve above that score. Because the idea behind an IQ score is that you can't make progress. Whatever your score is, that is always your score. And I can tell you, I've done this long enough to know that that is absolutely not the case. Because many aspects of it, quite frankly, I find arbitrary. Not only that, is there's a plus or minus 5, you know, with regards to any kind of score. And I've had too many cases to where, you know, the kid can be scored here, let's say inside of a school, and then get tested a year later with a private clinician, a psychologist, and have a completely different score outside of that plus or minus 5, which technically you're not supposed to be able to do that. Then I have had neuropsychologists and psychologists tell me repeatedly that, for example, autism isn't, you know, that's not a very reliable IQ score because of the nature of how autism manifests in many, many, many kids, my child included. Because she bottoms out on an IQ. I think one score she, you know, got in the 40s, which, you know, according to conventional wisdom, I mean, you know, that's severely, severely intellectually disabled. And she's not. She can read. She can, you know, hack my Amazon account. You know, the girl is very smart. She just has a very limited ability to communicate. And so much of the IQ, and I know that people go, well, there's nonverbal. Yeah, but my daughter also has a serious auditory processing, which means that her receptive language, which regards to, you know, the instructions that somebody would give her to do a nonverbal or other components, is also impacted. But that doesn't mean that my daughter can't assess a situation. She can absolutely read, and like I said, she can figure things out. Very smart, and so therefore that score does not reflect her abilities because she has a neurological disorder. And I think that this is where we need to rethink some of the stuff that we're doing in the danger and what I don't like about IQ scores. And there are some schools and there are some school staff that look at it and they go, I'm not going to sit there and confine this kid or give this kid an educational death sentence because of this score. This score means nothing. And what I'd love is school staff to raise the level and raise the bar for this child, regardless of what that damn score says, and say, I'm not giving up on you. And we're going to bust our butts and you can achieve anything. Goals. And that's where educational planning comes in. And that's where the development of IEP goals comes in. And that's where service minutes come in. And I see too many schools that go, oh, this kid has a 55. Well, 55 in a lot of states, a score of 55 or below in many, many states would be indicative of what they call severely cognitively disabled. And then that provides them an excuse to remove them from general education settings if the kid doesn't have behaviors. And I have many schools that will play that game. And then I come into the picture and I sit there and I go, why in the hell is this kid in a general education setting? They have no behaviors. Well, their IQ score was a 55. But the kid has autism. That's your highest functioning kid. And he's not going to, you have him charted to where, what's he going to do with his life? He's almost 18. What's he been doing for the last 4 years? Oh, well, he's been helping all the kids with their work. And, he's been running for us as far as to the office. Oh, he's so great in here. What about his education? What about giving him a chance? Because you have him on the lowest diploma option to where he cannot get a job independently, to where he's always going to be the responsibility of the state or the responsibility of his family. Stripping him of that option, of that opportunity, not even giving him that option because of a perceived. And so what did we do? We got an independent one with a psychologist, and his score wasn't 55. It was higher. And they had no justification for doing what they did for 4 freaking years. That's why when your child gets 9th grade, they should be discussing diploma options every year, explaining them to you as a parent, and then having you decide which diploma path is logical. And for many of our kids, we should at least be trying that middle rung. I'm talking about on the moderate to severe side. We should at least think about it and consider that middle diploma option in the states that have them tiered like that. And that's my problem, is that I have a lot of kids that are 10 years old, for example, and they give them an IQ score and they automatically put them on the extended standards or the alternative diploma path. And those things are educational death sentences when they're done that early in their education career. The other thing is that I don't like anything that had a nasty, nasty, nasty beginning with regards to their how they came about in our society. And IQ scores came about during the age of eugenics, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, with Sir Francis Galton, who was related to Darwin. He's the one that coined the phrase survival of the fittest. And then, that philosophy that, some people are just genetically better than other people. And, that's where we ended up getting, these cockamamie, ideas that, that let's say, I don't want to get into, eugenics had to change its name because it is one of the things that we had a lot of eugenic laws in this country where we forced sterilized people. We forced sterilized them, meaning that they they couldn't have kids because the state came in and operated on them to where they could not have children for being, let's say, a drunk, for being what they considered an imbecile, what they considered being an idiot. It just didn't matter, guys. We had those laws. That's where Planned Parenthood came out of. I mean, I know that a lot of, you just don't want to accept that. But Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger came out of that movement. We also have a lot of Planned Parenthoods in urban centers for a reason. They're not in suburbs. Just because people get comfortable with how things are now doesn't mean that they didn't have sinister beginnings and a sinister purpose for why they were created. IQ scores came out of that so that we could sit there and test people and put them in these boxes and categories of superior and inferior. And we still do that. And I'm not comfortable with that. I understand why we were doing it back then. I didn't agree with what they were doing back then. I wasn't alive back then. I don't know if I'd be sitting here because, I'm of Italian descent, and we were those dirty Southern Europeans, those darker Europeans down there that were part of eugenics, that in the early 1900s, there were signs everywhere that they wouldn't hire Italians. They wouldn't hire Catholics. They wouldn't hire Irish. You guys need to Google these pictures. If you sit there and think somehow in this great division in 2021 of, black and white, yeah, I think everybody's clueless as to what the hell white was. It didn't. It's such a fiction, because there were signs for generations limiting, what kind of white got a job and what one didn't. And that was part of this eugenics idea of this tiered superiority. IQs came out of that. So I understand that now, they've sort of been legitimized, and, now we use them in this sort of targeted kind of way. But do we? Because if I even have one school that's using it as an excuse to remove kids from general education settings, then isn't that one too many? And I know that happens with my Down syndrome clients all the time. That is my biggest thing I have to worry about there, is starting right around first, second grade. There is just this massive obsession with trying to score them out of their general education class and increase their involvement in self-contained environments. And what do they use as that tool? They use the IQ score as that tool to be able to do that. Instead of understanding that there is a functional benefit, that we have, an educational performance foundation, the pillars holding up special education. What are the three areas, the main areas, that we design IEP goals around? It's our three educational performance areas of academics, communication, and social emotional development. One isn't more important than the other ones, guys. Nowhere in the law does it say that we give priority to academics, but that's what educators do. They put a priority on academics. And so what they do is they minimize the value of communication, which, quite frankly, Finland's getting it right. They're number one in the world. Well, they don't even teach reading and math. Not until they get the socialization down and they get the communication down in those early developmental years. And then they start transitioning to hard academics starting around 7 years old. Prior to then, it's all play. It's all socialization. It's all communication. And we do it ass backwards in the United States, pushing in reading and math at younger ages instead of focusing, like me, dumb me, to where I got half-day kindergarten, which was awesome for me. That's what I needed. I didn't need more than that because I wanted to be home with my mom. And that's true. And so I had a real hard time letting go. I'm embarrassed to say now, but, now I'm very mentally healthy, I think. I'm not going to give you my age, but you think about that. I was doing nothing but Elmer's glue and my construction paper, making turkeys, and trying to learn how to use scissors and playing a lot. That was our experience, and there was value in that. And somehow we flipped it to where academics became a priority. And what ended up coming out of that? Well, now we don't want certain kids in the classes. Now general educators are like, I really didn't sign up for this Down syndrome stuff or this autism stuff. And, that's just too bad. You're not special. You have a job, and all of our kids should be treated and be given those opportunities. And so there should be a priority change, sort of from that academic, or we're obsessed with academics, to where we're obsessed with communication and social and emotional learning opportunities. And that's all you do is sort of shift the prioritizing, for specific learning disability, let's say. I understand that. If there is no other need in these areas, which I don't agree with, because there typically tends to be a relationship between communication deficits, for example, and what we start seeing in, let's say, dyslexia. So you see how these educational performance areas all sort of go together. But in assessing a child, and you sit there and you go, screw the IQ score, has nothing to do with what this child needs in an educational performance area of social emotional learning, functional skills, and communication. And they get that with their general education peers. The science is there to support that. So that's my problem with IQ scores. Only there, and the only real purpose in their existence inside any kind of public education is to identify whether a child is eligible under the area of intellectual disability or in one of those specific learning disabilities if you're using one of those prongs that has that discrepancy in there. But now we have other prongs available to where we look at patterns of strengths and weaknesses, to where an IQ score is inconsequential, to where we look at a child spinning their wheels in the RTI, response to intervention, that's supposed to be a temporary program, and we go, well, they've exhausted, they've already tier 3'd themselves to death. Now let's look at this. So we really don't need an IQ score. Quite frankly, that's where it's archaic. When we have these other mechanisms, those other safety net reviews, to where we could sit there and identify that a child would benefit from specialized instruction. But what I get really, really sick of are these educators that think that they're some kind of gatekeeper, to this, to a child's education future, where they get to sit there and be that wall and that obstacle on some kid's future. And I wish, and we have so many great educators out there and so many great administrators, but we have a few bad apples that feel that it is their responsibility to poison that well and destroy children in their future, what they want to be, what they want to grow up to be. I was not good at math. And thank God, I'm good at this. I'm not good at that. And we really should let kids determine what they're good at and what they're obsessed about in this world. We need more painters. We need more artists. We need more dancers. We need more music. We need kids with an array of talents to bring to the table of this fabric of society, our symphony. We need all instruments. And that's why I'm not a real big fan of this obsession with math and science and the reading I get, but STEM, I just don't see this obsession. We're stripping our society of a well-rounded symphony. I answered it in a different way, but it's very similar to the one that you can't find.